CURES, sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.
Helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore cutting-edge wellness for our mind, body, and spirit from credible sources. And today we're happy that our resident psychologist, Dr. Laura Saunders, is back from the Institute of Living on this day, as of this recording, which is National Set a Good Example Day. Thank you for being with us.
Right. Who knew that there was National Set a Good Example Day? But I found this and I just thought it was a great topic to talk about. And then sort of weave that into, parents having to be role models and good examples. But this really applies to everyone. It applies to teachers and coaches and aunts and uncles and everyone that has an impact on a child's life. It's upon us to set a good example.
Yeah, and that can feel stressful. But let's just talk about a little bit, because, we also have talked about this feeling of having to be perfect or this. But when it comes to our kids learning, how much of it really is that they're observing us and the adults around them?
I think it's actually it's a pretty strong correlation between children seeing something and then imitating it. It's the expression "do what I say, not what I do" is in fact the opposite of what really happens. I just shared with you, I have a very clear memory in my childhood, right? I grew up in Bergen County, North Jersey, and there was we got all the New York stations, and there was a commercial on about a father and a son sitting on a hillside overlooking like a highway, and the father pulling out a pack of cigarettes, and then the son pulling out a fake pack of cigarettes, and the father tapping the cigarettes, and then the son tapping the cigarettes, and all the steps, and then the father smoking a cigarette, and then the son, smoking a fake cigarette or stick or whatever was in it. And it was supposed to be an anti-smoking commercial, but it was such a powerful commercial. I remember it so clearly, and just that beautiful modeling that happens, and that the father wasn't even paying attention to his son sitting next to him. He was just going about this activity, and his son just imitated the whole thing. And that is such a great example of how powerful your behavior is as a parent.
Yeah. And maybe, I hope, motivating that, we say, well, I got to do better for my kids. But let's talk about how we learn, because you say so much of it is direct learning through observation rather than instruction. So they're watching us all the time. They're like little sponges.
Right. So it really is the actions and the attitudes that you display is what directly influences how they develop and behave in life. And so, parents want to impart values and morals on their children, and they can espouse whatever they want, but it really is their actions that are the most powerful. And so often what we want to do as parents or as caregivers or as aunts or uncles or whoever's having an impact on the life of a young person is model your behavior and try to the best of your ability to have your behavior and your words match.
Okay. And when we talk about building character and values, we all want our kids to have good values. But when we model positive behaviors, honesty, kindness, respect, that is one way, even more so maybe than talking about it, that we teach our kids those values and those morals.
It really is how parents actively shape their child's moral development, right? It is through our actions. You can go to church every Sunday or every weekend or go to synagogue, whatever it is. You can do that kind of a thing and think that you're imparting values. And then when you leave church, swear at the person who cut you off. And, it really is that your behavior has to match your values. So sometimes parents think they're imparting something, but in fact, they're imparting just the opposite.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, like, when you come in, when people are coming in to see you, and some of the typical family problems you might see that you need to help people through, how does this play out? What do you wish parents would know so maybe we could prevent some of the ill effects?
So this is a great question. So I do a lot of family therapy in the work that I do. As a child and adolescent psychologist, you have to have some proficiency in family therapy, although I do it for young adults as well. And the most important thing about family therapy, kind of the goal for a lot of family therapy, is to improve communication, right? It's to bring forward the spoken word, right? So sometimes you may act in a certain way but not be sending the message that you want to send. So we need your words and your behaviors to match. And we talk all the time about this concept called the good enough parent. You don't have to be, there are no perfect parents, right? Neither you nor I, none of us are perfect. There are no perfect parents. You just need to be a good enough parent. And in some of those situations where something goes wrong or damage does occur, or you behave or act in a way that really honestly goes against your values, there's ways that you can fix that even without looking at, therapy, but there's ways you can fix that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. Like I asked you earlier, like what if, we always hear it's not good to fight in front of your kids. And I think most parents understand that, maybe even try to prevent that. But sometimes it happens, and maybe you're not handling things well. And you're like, oh my gosh, I just messed up. Do you have to worry that you just traumatized your child, or what do we do? Can we fix it?
So honestly, in any relationship, but certainly even in a parent-child relationship, the strength of the relationship actually comes in the repair. So sometimes I use the metaphor of a muscle, right? You want to build a muscle, right? The way you build a muscle is by kind of tearing at the fibers, right? And then you let it rest a little bit, and then it strengthens. So it's the same thing in relationships, and certainly in parent-child relationships. Sometimes things happen that tear at the fiber of the relationship. And it really is in the repair. It is in the coming back and saying, listen, you know what? I did not handle that situation well. I'm actually kind of embarrassed about the way that I lost control, and I want to apologize, and I'm going to make an effort to do things differently, right? So it really is about the repair. It's about the communication and how we communicate what our intentions are. So often as adults, look, we have busy, stressful lives. And sometimes we just kind of get up in our own head and we just sort of motor through the day or power through the day without taking the time to say, I didn't actually explain why I did that, right? And so if parents are arguing, which all parents argue, right? If they're arguing, and very often what they do is they separate and then maybe come back to it at a later time, and then the kids don't actually see the repair. It's coming back and saying, listen, I know you saw your other parent and I arguing. I'm sorry that you had to see that, but this is important to me, which is why I sort of stuck my ground. But I want you to know that we did get back together and we did come up with this solution, right? So it's about that communication.
Okay. Just to follow up on that, if you do have the wherewithal, is it best to not argue about things in front of your kids, like go behind closed doors?
I think that's completely unrealistic. We all, at some, maybe on TV or something, but
Right.
I don't know that that's realistic. So I don't even want to set that as a standard.
Okay, good.
Now, what I don't want is like abusive things to happen. Like, well, obviously not, I'm not even talking about the level of domestic violence, but I'm talking about like hurtful words or bringing up really negative things from the past. I mean, that kind of stuff, I really want people to dial it back. That can be very hurtful, and some of that's a little bit more difficult to repair. But the reality is parents are going to disagree. Like a parent and a grandparent might disagree. You can have disagreements. It's not the act of disagreeing that is damaging. It's the not repairing or not fixing it that becomes damaging.
Yeah, somehow role modeling some conflict. I think that the question is, so many people say, and you hear this in psychology all the time, is that behaviors modeled during childhood have a lasting effect. So you might be doing and acting out exactly how you grew up, even though that's not what you want. So part of your job as a parent, I guess, is to end the cycle. But how do you do that?
The reality is parents do the best that they can, but it really takes some time, and I really mean more emotional time, and a fair amount of self-reflection. to really examine, go dig down deep and examine the way that you were raised and the things that happened to you, and then how to either not perpetuate that cycle, or in fact, if some of the things were good, how to be mindful to recreate some of the same things. So it does require, that kind of introspection process. When we do family therapy, it's fairly common that we would talk with the parents about how they were raised and the kinds of things that they did or didn't like in the way that they were raised, and how that's impacting their ability to work together as a team, or to, how to raise, how to parent their children. So we do kind of dig deep in some of that stuff, but I think it's just helpful for a lot of parents. And you don't even have to be, this process should start in pregnancy and infancy. And this is an ongoing process, because each developmental stage brings with it its own challenges. And the reality is sometimes you have children who have temperaments that don't match up well with the temperament, or in adults we call personality, don't match up well with the personality of the parent, and it's not a good fit. So, so sometimes in those situations, and obviously I see more of those situations than not, when a parent and a child are not a good fit, that their child's temperament doesn't blend well with the adult's temperament, or they're both, they both have poor emotion regulation and neither of them can help the other. So we have to kind of examine that. So it really is it's an ongoing developmental process as a parent, to really dig deep and look at how you're managing things, what happened to you as a child, and what you want to mindfully continue and mindfully not continue in terms of habits and behaviors.
I mean, the hopeful thing is what you're saying is you also can change. I mean, the repair, I love that you said the repair is even more important than the disagreement. So you can go back and say, I didn't handle myself well, I want to do it this way. There's learning in that. But also you say the positive influence on social development is extreme. Like parents, when we do engage, we all have our good sides. So when our kids see us helping others or resolving conflicts peacefully, they're learning from that in a very strong way.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you build trust and support. So you build trust and support when young people see their parents consistently acting in accordance with their words and their values. That's how you build trust. I mean, I don't want to get too psychological here, but it starts with in infancy, it starts with attachment, right?
Yeah. That
when your child's hungry, they're fed. When they're uncomfortable, they're soothed. When they're wet, they're changed, right? And when those needs get met. And that's being the good enough parent. You're not going to do it perfectly all the time, and there's a good amount of problem solving that happens in those early stages, but that's what forms that attachment. And when you have a secure attachment, you have the ability then to engage in behavior that might rupture or repair that attachment a little bit, but then you come back to fix it. So that's how you build long-term respect and trust in your relationship.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, people, if they're following a lot of psychology online or things like that, it's almost becoming commonplace. They're calling it attachment theory, and there's different ways that I guess my partner or me, we could all have, it could happen very, very early in our life, just how we attach to people. So that's something, I guess, as parents, maybe even we want to be aware of what our attachment MO or style is.
Styles, right, right. And actually that probably is a, great topic to talk about at some point, is talking about attachment styles, because attachments, there's secure, there's insecure, there's anxious, there's avoidant, right? There's all sorts of different attachment styles. And those styles often start in early childhood and carry up into childhood. And then you see the attachment styles play out in other relationships. It starts, and sometimes in friendships or romantic relationships, or then, partnerships as you get older. So you really look at how attachment styles, but that probably would be a great charisma.
Yeah. I want to, I want to take a quick break and hear from our sponsor, but when we come back, I want to talk about, there's a big movie right now, It Ends With Us, besides all the stuff happening in the fighting among the actors, but that idea that we're all living in a time of kind of being more aware and trying to change things psychologically, so we can talk about that and these cycles when we come back, but let's hear from our sponsors.
Struggling with gambling? Wheeler Health's Better Choice program offers personalized support and treatment to help you regain control. Visit wheelerhealth.org to learn more and take the first step towards recovery today.
So as we come back, I'm mindful that the Wheeler Clinic, who is a sponsor of this show because they want to help folks locally in Connecticut with addiction and all of that. I'm here with Dr. Laura Saunders, and I'm thinking, you know, so many of us might have grown up in a home where there was substance abuse. Maybe someone was an alcoholic, or somebody else had a substance program, or anything like that. And of course, I'm guessing kids thought, I don't want that, but they often end up repeating it, or they repeat the bad habits of their parents. What do we do about that?
Right. So those are, I think, very serious issues, and I'm not even, talking about some of the bigger things that might sort of come across, my office, so to speak.
Yeah.
The bigger things around domestic violence or about trauma. Those are really, bigger, more significant things. What's equally as important is some of the smaller things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that parents do in terms of their behaviors, right? Are you the parent that's having a drink every night when you get home? Are you the parent that is exercising, trying to fit exercise into your life? There's positive and negative behaviors, and the more we can try to the best of our ability to make changes to be the best role models, it really helps our children overall. And so, it does require effort on all our parts, and it can be a daunting task when sometimes you just feel like you're getting through the day. But sometimes that little bit of self-reflection and, realizing how it impacts your children can be really significant.
Yeah, because we're really talking about that as social creatures, we really do learn. You mentioned that, I mean, it could be the reverse. You mentioned that your mother smoked and none of her children did. So they actually went the opposite way. So it could be that sometimes our mistakes. What if, obviously none of us are perfect. So what if we did do something bad? Maybe we didn't manage finances correctly, or, we've had a problem with eating bad food and making bad choices. And now we're really like going, I want my kid to be healthy, but look at me, I'm eating the Twinkies. How do we balance, when we're a work in progress, having our kids learn a little bit more from how we'd like them to be than what we're working on?
Well, it's that process of speaking it out loud, right? Not just saying like, oh, I know I've been eating terrible for the past few months and I really need to make some changes. It's saying it out loud. You know what? I realize, family, we've not been eating as healthy the past few months because we've been under a lot of stress. And I'm hoping that we all can make some changes and include, I always like to do small measurable things. Like we can include one vegetable or fruit in our daily diet, right? Something small and measurable. So it is about that communication. It's about speaking it out loud. It's about that identification process, and then communicating it, and then stepping into it. And again, small measurable change, not we're never going to eat fast food again for the rest of our lives, is not realistic if you've been eating it every day.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to limit ourselves to, one or two fast food meals a week, or we're going to include one fruit or vegetable in our diet each day. Small measurable changes. That's really where the best success comes.
So I know a lot of parents are concerned that they're divorcing or have divorced, and that somehow that's damaging to the children. It's something that happens a lot. I think 60% of relationships nowadays end in divorce. So how do people handle that in a way to be a good example? Because you're not going to get rid of all divorce, but I think everyone probably is hoping they're not hurting their kids.
Well, this is a great question, and I think something a lot of parents struggle with. So there's two core issues that have to do with long-term success in post-divorce, significant separation. And those two critical issues are communication and conflict. That kids who are, come from families that have experienced divorce will do best when there is high communication and low conflict. So whatever you need to do, right? If you have low communication and low conflict, that's not a great outcome. Obviously, low communication, high conflicts are a really bad outcome. So whatever you need to do as parents in these situations to mindfully each day make a commitment to decreasing conflict and increasing communication, that's where kids have the best outcomes.
Okay. And I've had people come to me about that and say, I do a lot of work in this area. So what do I do? I really am, I don't think my partner should be involved in my kids' lives at at all. They're really an awful person, and wondering if they should somehow work to cut them out of the life or really put up walls. Can the parent who you're concerned about with, maybe they treated you awful, really bad, but they can be a good parent, and we can have both? They might actually have had a lot of flaws, but that doesn't mean they're going to pass those flaws on to kids.
Right. So this is a pretty deep topic. But I will tell you what my guideline is in these situations.
Yeah.
What you have to look at in that is that, when you're going through a separation and divorce, often your perspective is skewed, right? You have, over time, likely developed a lot of strong negative feelings about your partner. But you need to take a deep, deep look at how they are as a parent. That as a general rule, allowing your child to have some type of relationship with both of their parents is in their best long-term social emotional development. So having a relationship with both parents is in overall their best long-term development. Now that's not, if someone was significantly abusive or, other things, that needs to be taken into consideration. But here's the example, and this might be a controversial example, but remember this. O.J. Simpson was allowed to keep an ongoing relationship with his children, despite what he was accused of and what everyone believed that he did. So for whatever he did to his wife or ex-wife, he was allowed to continue a relationship. And, there was court orders, all sorts of things. He was allowed to continue a relationship with his children. And so there's a lot of situations where people are not always good people and sometimes do some bad things, but they can still muster the emotional space to be decent parents to their children. And in those situations, having some contact with them overall is in the child's best interest. But that's that's not for a particular situation. There might be a situation where that's not the case, but as a general rule, that's what I recommend.
No, I think the general rules help. And in my own life, I experienced that. I didn't grow up with my father. Later on, wanted a relationship, and I'm very grateful to my mother that she was encouraging of that, because as a mom who raised me alone, I know that was difficult, and I probably worried about that for her. But she used to say, like, I think you should have a relationship with your father. I think that's helpful for you, and that's what you're saying.
And you wrote a book about it.
And I wrote a book about it. Yeah, I do think it was settling to me. I think the reason why I ended up with a good guy is because I did a lot of the feeling around those issues. So, I mean, I think what you're saying is we can have really imperfect, this is maybe the hopeful part, we can all have very imperfect parents, or their situations can be very imperfect, but somehow kids can learn from them. And it's really how the parents handle it. And repair things and what they say that's going to matter, not that they're this perfect Walton family that didn't have all these flaws.
Right. High communication, low conflict. So in those divorce situations, I will tell you 100% of the time, bad mouthing the other parent is as if you're bad mouthing your child, because your child considers themselves, emotionally half of two individuals. So if you're bad mouthing the other parent, it's as if you're bad mouthing your child. So the more you can keep that conflict level down and try deeply to do what's in the best interest of your child. And often what's in the best interest of your child is to have a relationship, some kind of relationship with both parents.
Okay, good to know. In our final 5 minutes together, I'm thinking that things that families struggle with all the time, maybe emotional regulation, especially with teens and kids, they're flying off the handle. And you may realize that one of you is better at, keeping their cool than the other. But what you're saying is, I guess what I'm asking is, if you're not great at something, how do you teach it? The point being is you're trying to learn as you go, and then you're acknowledging when you mess up?
I do think there's a lot of power in the identification and acknowledgement. And in situations where you do have a partner and you realize actually your partner is much better at this than you, kind of like, separating some of those responsibilities or allowing your partner to sort of take a little bit more charge in certain situations because you just know that you're not good at it, is okay. And because what you're saying is, I recognize I'm not good at the organization or whatever, whatever the emotion regulation, it could be bigger things. And so I'm going to allow my spouse, and sometimes these are blended situations where it's like a grandparent and a parent who are the main caregivers. So, recognizing what you're not good at. And, I think the burden about being a parent sometimes is that to be a good enough parent does take the effort and the energy to try to improve yourself and improve the life of your children. So, I say all the time, the two greatest gifts we give our children are time and attention. Even when we have very little of it, giving them at least a little bit of time and attention can be hard, but it's the greatest gifts that you give your children.
Yes, time and attention, the greatest gift for sure. So on this, as we finalize on this Be a Good Example Day, National Be a Good Example Day, I guess there's the good and the bad. The good is that we have a lot of power, and then the awareness being that we need to be aware because our kids are really watching what we do more than what we say.
Right. It's a double-edged sword, but the beautiful information is that tomorrow the sun will rise and you will have another opportunity to make some changes and do the best that you can.
Life goes on. All right, Dr. Laura Saunders, we appreciate all of your, we get a little bit more time. I'm sorry. I was thinking we had 1 minute. We have 2 minutes. Okay, I'm not letting you go just yet. Okay. Let me ask you this. I'll put you on the spot. For those who are concerned about maybe not passing on some of the trauma that they've had or some of the whatever, any types of therapy or even books or things you think that you would want parents to do because they're concerned that they don't want an unhealthy cycle to continue with their kids?
Right. So the reality is that there are many individuals out there who've experienced what we call adverse childhood events, ACEs. There's actually a massive decades-long study that's looked at this. So adverse childhood events. And so if you're someone who's experienced adverse childhood events, it could be any type of trauma, it could be domestic violence, it could be, a parent being incarcerated, it could be exposure to substance use. There's a lot of different things that would fall under that. It really, I think sometimes people engage in behaviors and they don't even realize that the behaviors that they're engaging in on a regular basis are in fact a product of the adverse childhood events that they experienced. Mm-hmm. And so it really starts with that connection piece. It's like, oh my God, I scream at my kids every day because I had this trauma happen to me. Or, I had a single parent who was low socioeconomic status and was, also struggling with a substance abuse issue, and they just had no energy for me. And, then I just did whatever the heck I wanted. And so now I hate anyone that tries to put any limits on me, right? It is often digging deep in those situations and recognizing how you were impacted and then how that's playing out in your day-to-day behavior.
Yeah, the awareness can be so key. It's not about that, these people grew up and everything looked perfect, because we know that there are no Hallmark families, but that awareness and that hope. So thank you for sharing a little bit of that. That's what I want everyone to walk away with. We can all be good examples with that awareness and that hope. So thank you, Dr. Laura Saunders.
Thank you, Carol.
All right, everyone, have a great day and be well. If you're listening on the podcast, we would love it if you would leave a review, share this with your loved ones, and continue to subscribe. Have a great day and be well.
CURES is sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.